Welcome. This is our career chat on forensics. And we are very fortunate to have two center alums who are willing to join us and who are accomplished in the field of forensics. We have Jasmine Kaiser, and she is a criminalist with the San Diego Police Department. And then we also have Shelley Crispin, and she is a forensic scientist who works mostly in DNA. Is that correct?
Yes.
And she is with the Indianapolis-Marion County Forensic Services. So they're each going to talk a little bit about their background, their career path, their career field, that kind of thing. And then afterwards, you guys can ask questions. So I think we decided that Jasmine would kick us off. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Sure. Hey, so I'm Jasmine Kaiser. I graduated from Center in 2011. I was in the biology department. I'd say the most forensic-y thing I did when I was at Center, I did my internship with the medical examiner's office in Louisville, which was pretty cool. Dr. Tracy Corey was the lead medical examiner there, and she's a Center alum. So she occasionally takes people who are pre-med to do internships there. And so that was really big for me because I realized I'm okay looking at dead people, which is sometimes something you have to do in forensics. And that's not really something that you can find out any other way than just doing it. So after Center, I knew that I wanted to do forensics, so I decided that I would get my master's degree. So I went to Boston University. Their School of Medicine has a forensics program. So they do mostly DNA and chemistry. So I did my master's there, and I wrote a thesis paper while I was there. So I got a lot of hands-on time working with the actual instrumentation that I'd be working on in a crime lab, which was super helpful because when I started applying for jobs, forensics is really big right now, and there's a lot of people applying, particularly in DNA. So when I finally got the job out here in San Diego with the police department, they told me I was one of 200 applicants. So having a master's degree was really big and part of the reason why I got the job. And also my master's program, my PI for my thesis program, she was well respected in the field. She had actually tried to hire the guy who ended up being my boss in San Diego when she ran her own private lab back in the day, Dr. Robin Cotton. So having those connections with people in the field and kind of getting your foot in the door and getting to know people. I mean, it's the same as any field. You know, the more people you know, the more chances you have of making a good impression and getting your foot in the door. When I got to San Diego PD, I went through about 3 months of training in basic biological fluids and doing testing. We do a process called Y-screen with sexual assault kits, where we're just screening for the presence of male DNA. So I did that for about a year while I was also training in full DNA analysis. So really it took about 2 years before I was fully trained to do everything that was required of my job. In San Diego, like I was kind of talking about while you guys were filtering in, we're also, if you're a criminalist, you also are part of the crime scene reconstruction program. So I also go out to crime scenes specifically for bullet trajectory analysis and blood spatter. So I've gone to a couple of scenes with that. And now I've testified I've been at San Diego PD about 5 years, testified probably 12 or 15 times. And I've done a little bit of everything: homicides, sex crimes, child abuse, property crimes. And I love it. It's really a rewarding job. I find it really personally fulfilling. It's really nice to know, like, every day that you come in, what you're doing is important and it really matters. And you have to be on your A game all the time because this is people's lives. But it's also far enough removed that, you know, I'm not looking victims in the eye. I'm not having to interrogate anybody. I don't carry a gun. I don't arrest anybody. I don't wear suits to my crime scenes. So it's very different than what you see on TV, but it's still, I still really love the job. And it's really nice being able to work with a group of people who are dedicated and who enjoy what they do.
Okay, thank you. Shelley, you want to jump in now?
Sure. I graduated Center College in 2001, and I had a degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. And I knew while I was at Center College that I wanted to do forensic DNA analysis specifically. So afterwards, I got a master's degree as well from the University of North Texas Health Science Center and their forensic genetics program. And just like Jasmine said, it's very important to get that master's degree to get your foot in the door, because they will train you specifically on the instruments that you need to use and give you basic interpretation knowledge that you can take with you to work. After that, while I was with UNT, like Jasmine said, I was going to conferences with my professors, and I made some good connections, and I actually got a job at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, and I worked with them for about 2.5 years doing serology, which is like the analysis of semen, blood, and saliva. And I did a little bit of DNA. I really liked it there. It just, unfortunately, that area is just too daggone expensive to live. And so a job opened up in my home state of Indiana in Indianapolis, and I moved here. And I've been with the Indianapolis-Marion County for approximately 12 years now. So I've been in the field for a while. I started off as a DNA analyst, went through a year training program here in Indy. And in 2014, I was promoted to be the DNA technical manager. So my job as the tech lead now is to basically write our lab's policies and procedures for how we treat DNA samples. I'm also responsible for the validation studies and projects that we do with equipment and the research that we do here. And I'm also responsible for our budgeting and business plan. And in addition to this, I also do casework because we are very short-staffed right now. We did hire 4 people, but if it takes a year to train people, even though we've had them here for a while, they're still not quite up and running. So I still do expedite cases, and I typically testify maybe twice a month. So I really enjoyed Center College. I thought Center College really helped prepare me to, especially the biochemistry department, you know, you're presenting all the time, and you're having to write your laboratory reports and lab stuff. And so I learned how to write from Center College, to write laboratory protocols and procedures. And I think, you know, I learned how to present as well, because scientists, you can be introvert, but with DNA, with testifying in court, you are going to have to be comfortable communicating scientific concepts to individuals at a level from which they can understand. So typically when you go to court, you have to assume that your jury has like maybe a junior high level education for DNA when you break it down and explain your results to them as well. And I was also going to say too, internships. I had an internship with the Armed Forces Laboratory. I did that when I was in graduate school. If you want to do one while you're in college, the FBI does have one. It's called the FBI Honors Intern Program. And if you're interested for working with the federal government, that's a good one, because they will, if you apply for a job there at a later date, they preferentially pick those people for future employees.
Okay, thank you. Do you guys, this is your chance to ask specific questions. Anybody got a question? No? Nobody, Sean? Yeah.
Hey, Shelley and Jasmine, it's Peggy Ritchie. You might not be back here, but I recognize you guys.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Good. You look great. I'm glad you guys both doing so well. What would you say in retrospect, academically? So definitely an internship would be a good thing, right? While they're here, academically, and not just thinking about the sciences, what kind of courses did you take, or do you wish you had taken to help you in your master's program and beyond?
Good question.
For me, I thought Center College, especially the molecular biology program and everything I did, really prepared me well for writing laboratory protocols and procedures. I thought also too, being that we had that general curriculum, that we had to take the humanities classes, it teaches you critical thinking on a different level, which you will need. The only thing I wish I would have taken at Center College, because I was so science oriented, I had no clue how to do a budget or a business plan. And my operating budget's around $500,000, and I have to interact with different companies and pull together purchase agreements. And so that was quite the crash course in 2014. I was very lucky that our financial manager was willing to work with me, and he's retired now. So I say I wish I would have had a little more business component too, because I think a lot of scientists leave that business out of it thinking they're not going to need that.
Yeah, I think one of the big things outside of the obvious biology classes and all the science background that you need to be a DNA analyst, for me, I was also heavily involved in the drama program at Center. I acted, I did behind the scenes tech work, and that's huge for being able to be comfortable in court because you're not always going to know what they're going to ask you. Even when the prosecutor, hopefully you've talked to them before trial and you have some idea what questions they're going to ask you, but they don't always give you a script and tell you where they're going with stuff. So a lot of times you're trying to guess what they're asking you because they're not scientists. So they're trying to ask you a scientific question, but they don't know what it means. So they ask you the wrong thing. So you're trying to guess where they're going with it. The defense attorneys are even worse because you have no idea where they're going and what holes they're trying to poke or what alternative story they're trying to give of what happened. So drama was really huge for me, just being able to kind of think on your feet and be ready for anything and feel confident that you know your case very well and you know what you did, and be able to just sometimes give off the cuff answers for things you weren't expecting. As far as classes that I wish I had taken or could be paid a little bit more attention to when I was in them, statistics. We're doing a lot of science, but in the end, you need to explain why what you're saying is relevant. So for every conclusion that I give, I have to give a statistic to say it's 10 million times more likely that scenario A happened than scenario B. It's 50 million times more likely that it's this person than an unknown individual. So being able to know what those statistics really mean and explain those in court. And now we're getting into much more complicated ways of explaining what we're doing. And we're using high-level mathematics and Bayesian stuff to do our comparisons. So that's all way more math than I ever took when I was in college. So I wish that I had maybe done a little bit more of that because I didn't realize how important that was going to be when I finally got into forensics. But something that kind of goes along with that, and we were talking about this beforehand, there are 4 classes that are required by the FBI if you want to be a DNA analyst. So those are just straight required. So it's biochemistry, genetics, statistics, and then population genetics, I think is the 4th.
Yes.
So those 4 classes you have to take at some point in order to be able to be a DNA analyst. And you can take that either as a undergrad or in graduate program if you do take that. But as far as the science goes, those are required.
Student questions, don't be shy, this is your chance. I have a question.
Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
Are there any general trends in this field that would be good to be aware of?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Are there any general trends in the field that would be good to be aware of? Is hiring going to be more, less in the future, things like that?
Well, I know for the state of Indiana, we will probably be eventually hiring more individuals. I don't know how in the news, there's a lot of testing all sexual assault kits. Currently, Indiana is not a state that tests all sexual assault kits that come in the door. And so I know that our state legislature is trying to make that retroactive. And so we would have to test all sexual assault kits that are even in the backlog that we haven't tested. And the reason why we haven't tested them is because maybe the victim doesn't want to press charges. And so if she declines to press charges, then that kit doesn't get tested. So I know the state police lab here is looking to hire maybe 30 more individuals here within the next couple of years. If this goes through, we're trying to put in for grant money as well, because we'll have a backlog of 5,000 sexual assault kits if that law goes through. And so we'll definitely need more forensic scientists on board to get those out. As far as DNA technical manager and technical leader jobs, those are kind of far and few in between. There's only like approximately 450 of these positions in the US, and I kind of lucked into mine. So I plan on holding on to it until I retire.
Yeah, something similar is happening in California too. The testing all sexual assault kits is a really big thing in the field right now. And a lot of places are trying to legislate that. So that is definitely going to open up more positions around the country. I know that in California, they're trying to do similar, where it would be retroactive from 2016 at least. So it's not quite as extreme for us. But San Diego also has not had a policy of testing all rape kits. So we would also be we would be a little bit buried for a while trying to get through all of those kits. And then as it stands right now, we test probably 2/3 of the kits that are taken in any given year. So then if we're having to increase that every single year from now moving forward, doing all of that additional third of the kits, that's a lot. And we're in a lucky place in San Diego that we are able to do a lot of property crimes because we were a big enough laboratory. There's a lot of places that can really only work sort of your major crimes, your homicides, your sex crimes, child abuse, those sorts of cases. So San Diego as a city has been very lucky. We've been able to do a lot of burglaries and robberies, which puts away offenders who are likely to become your homicides and sexual assault suspects. So we really want to keep that up because if we've had people who've been doing burglaries and we get them for 30, 40 cases of burglary, and we can put them away for good because we're now able to do those types of cases. If we get to a point where we can't hire more, but we're having to work all these sex crimes, we're not going to be able to work cases like that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where the turning point is with DNA units right now. I don't know about other units. Obviously, there are other things in forensics. There's chemistry, there's fingerprinting, there's trace analysis. There's a lot of technology stuff going on right now. So we just opened up a forensic technology unit that's specifically looking at, laptops, cell phones, that kind of stuff, where there may be evidence of a crime on there. So there are a lot of other areas of forensics, and it's not like crime is going away. It might be going down in a lot of places, but we're never going to totally get rid of forensics units. So there's a lot of people applying for DNA right now, but there's also going to be opportunities for growth in that area too, and more positions opening up most likely. The one thing that I will say with forensics, if you really want to stay in a particular part of the US, that's a lot harder because there are a lot of people who really love their jobs and they're not going to leave until they retire. And you can't really guarantee that jobs are going to be opening up specifically where you want to be. So for example, I'm from Kentucky. I got the job in San Diego when I graduated from grad school. I'm happy to stay here because San Diego is pretty awesome. But a lot of my friends in grad school ended up in, far-flung places. And, I had a friend from New England, but he ended up in Missouri because that was the job that was available when he graduated. So you have to be a little bit flexible and willing to go to different parts of the U.S. if that's really the job that you want to have. And, hopefully eventually in your career, you'll be in a position where something will open up where you really want to live or where your family is or something like that, and you can move later. But you can't guarantee that a position is going to open up where you want to be as soon as you're ready to take it.
How did you pay for grad school?
Student loans. I was also a lab assistant while I was at Boston University, so I had a little bit of spending money there. But I'm definitely doing the public service loan forgiveness program now that I'm at San Diego. So I'm 4 years in right now, so another 6 years to go, and theoretically the rest of my loans will be forgiven. Stay tuned.
I had a part-time job or whatever, and also too, University of North Texas was not a residential campus, so you had to live off campus. And honestly, it was only, I'm going to date myself, but it was only $4,000 per semester, which is actually, knowing how much Center College is quite good bang for your buck. So luckily, I was not left with any debt after graduate school.
That was a quiet group. Okay, I'll ask one more question. What do you guys each like most about your job, and what do you like the least about your job?
I like the fulfillment I get out of my job every day. I did spend a year at the University of Tennessee, doing research. I spent a year in their biochemistry program, master's degree, before I really didn't like it. I was in the lab every day at 6 a.m. I would have class and I wouldn't leave the lab until 10:30, and my heart wasn't in it. I just didn't feel like I was making progress, because a lot of the graduate programs and PhDs, I feel like you're working so long and hard to get an answer, and you may not get to it, you know, within 4 or 5 years. And I'm very impatient. And that's why I love forensic DNA analysis, because you get that answer, you get that result, and you get to provide family with closure. And I think, you know, with my love of science and, you know, wanting to help out the community, I just think that that's a perfect fit. And I love being able to give back to the community in the way that I can with that. As far as the thing I don't like about my job is, I was kind of talking to Jasmine earlier, I think about 46% of our court cases are gun cases. Those are basically inconclusive mixtures for us, where basically we're not getting enough data to really report out. So I don't like doing cases where I know that I'm not really going to get good results, because I think it's just a waste of our resources and energy. But I mean, it's part of what I do, so I'll do them. But I'm working 6 of them today, and I can pretty much write them up without even having to do them. So I get a little frustrated in that I wish those cases could provide better results.
Yeah, for me, I love being in the lab. I love just kind of, you know, I've gotten to a place where I know exactly what I'm doing. I know I have a flow. I know I can get from point A to point B in this many hours, and I can get all of these things done. And it's just good to be able to get in there. And it's just like, it's almost an assembly line in my head now, where it's like, okay, cut your swab, stick it in the tube, put some liquid in it, go, go, go. And I feel like I've gotten to a place where like I can really just zero in on it. The interpretation can get to be really fun too, when you can look at your finished data and be like, oh yeah, I can see this guy is in here. This is going to be a good stat. Like, let's go, you know, bring that down to the detective and make their day. Sometimes writing the reports, reviewing other people's reports, everything that we do is go through 2 different rounds of review. There's a technical review by another analyst who's kind of at the same level that you are, and then an administrative review, which for us is usually done by a supervisor. So having to do tech reviews for other people's stuff can be a little bit of drudgery sometimes, because you're reading lab reports, you're reading somebody else's data, trying to catch, you know, little grammatical mistakes and stuff. Most of the time it's not anything that's serious. Most people know what they're doing, and you know, occasionally you're like, oh, well, this 3-person mixture might be a 4-person mixture. What do you think? There's some conversation, but a lot of it is you sitting at your desk with 40 pages of paper trying to go through and make sure everybody signed every single piece of paper and put their initials on here where they were supposed to. So that can get a little bit tedious, but it's worth it in the end, because you never have to worry about whether what you're doing is meaningful or not, because even for those cases where you may not find anything, or, you know, your results are inconclusive and you're kind of like, well, that sucks. It's still an answer. It's still information that they didn't have before you did your job. And especially on those days when you hit to somebody and you get to give a detective a name that they didn't know before, there was a totally cold case, they had no idea who committed this homicide or whatever, being able to walk down to them and say, hey, go find your guy. Like, that's a great feeling.
Okay, so I have a question. So I know you all had talked about having a master's. Do you all see people with anything like PhDs in your field, or is that not common or necessary?
There really aren't PhDs in forensic science specifically.
But I mean, just in like biochemistry or biology that go into that field.
Yeah, I know I have at least one PhD in my lab who started out in neuroscience and then kind of like fell out of the research and fell into forensics. So there definitely are people who end up in forensics with PhDs. It's not really required, and if you got a PhD, it would be in something like biochemistry or molecular genetics or something like that, which would definitely be applicable to forensics, but it's not necessarily gonna, like, you don't get paid more if you're a PhD, you don't get special treatment if you're a PhD. So, I mean, if that's something that you really want to do and forensics is like a backup, I guess that's fine. For me, though, forensics is very much a state of mind for a lot of the people who work there, that you have to be dedicated to it because you're not going to get paid well. You work for the government. So, I mean, you'll make enough to live, but you're not going to be a billionaire being a forensic scientist. There's a lot of other science that you could do with these skills that would make you a lot more money and maybe make you more famous than being a forensic scientist. So a lot of people who are in this field are in it because their heart's in it. And they really are passionate about what they do. So for me, I think that there are people who could fall into forensics as a second career or kind of find it later. But I find that a lot of the people that I work with chose to be there very specifically. So you don't see a lot of people who had degrees from other fields coming into forensics frequently, because it's a very different mindset than a lot of like research science.
Yeah, I agree with that too. We had a PhD who worked here for a while, and his mindset was completely different from the other forensic scientists who were here, because he's so research driven. But here you got to be quicker, use your protocols, get your case results out. And also too, I think we've interviewed a few PhDs and we didn't know really what to do with them as a hiring committee, because like Jasmine said, we can't pay them more money. And we did try to hire one, but they expected to have more money. And when you're in a government system, you can't just offer outside of the pay matrix just because someone has more education than someone else.
Anybody else? Last call.
What's like the gender dynamic of work right now? Like, are there a lot of women?
In our laboratory, we only have one guy in the DNA section, and he's the section supervisor. When I started off here, we had 3 guys here, but they ended up migrating. One went into the Secret Service because that's what he really wanted to do. Another one now works for the state police laboratory. So we're predominantly female based. When I was at the FBI, there were only, I worked with 60 other DNA analysts at that time and serologists, and I would say about 5 of them were male. It seemed like a lot of the supervisors were males. A lot of the laboratory workers were females. But that's how our lab is. What about you, Jasmine?
Yeah, I'd say we're maybe a little bit closer to 50-50 than all female. But yeah, both of the supervisors in biology are female. Our lab director is female. Yeah, at least half of my coworkers are female. So forensics is much closer to gender parity, and I really haven't found that being a woman in forensics is difficult. There's a ton of people who are doing great research that are female. A lot of, I would agree that probably still some of the like biggest names in the field are guys, but I don't think that that's going to stay that way for much longer. There's a lot of women who are doing really good work in forensics right now.
Could you tell us a little more about your FBI experience compared to what your job is now?
Sure. At the FBI, we went through an extensive 9-month background check. So everybody and my dog got interviewed pretty much. Had to go through a polygraph examination. And yeah, so they actually sent agents out and they did all of that. And I started, and I had about a 2-month training program because back then I was just doing serology only. And since it's such a big outfit, they have dedicated trainers there. So they just can, get you in and out the door for training. And when I started working there, I processed mostly sexual assault kits. I worked a lot of cases from the military from Afghanistan and Iraq. So a lot of terrorism related cases back then too. I really enjoyed my time there. I really did. The only thing that I did not like is that when I first went in there, they started breaking everything down kind of like assembly line. So you could do serology, and then I was supposed to learn how to do DNA all the way from start to finish, because that's what my master's degree is for. That's what I went to school for. However, they only had me doing DNA extraction, and someone else would do the DNA quantification. Someone else would report out the results. And so I became kind of like a cog in the wheel. And I got bored, and it was an expensive area to live. And so I started job hunting, and the job opened up in Indianapolis. And here I do everything. I do everything from the ground up. I still do serology. I write my own reports. I review other people's. Like, just the amount of variety that I have with my job now is so much more fulfilling. So that was another reason why I didn't, I wanted to end up leaving the FBI. But I don't know. It was the best place to get my feet wet, though.
Do you guys have any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts for the students?
I was waiting to see if Jasmine was going to speak first.
Forensics is awesome. I would suggest that if you're thinking about it, try and find an internship of some kind, because it definitely is a different world. There's a lot of gallows humor. We deal with people's worst days, and it's every day for us. And so there is a certain amount of disconnect that you have to make in your brain between what's happened and what the crime is and what your job is. You know, it's not for everybody. Not everybody can handle that. You know, I remember when I was at Center and my roommate was an English major and she had a job at a magazine and I had a job at the medical examiner's office, and she would talk about her day and I would try and talk about my day. She'd be like, I can't listen to you, Jasmine, because all I can think about is their families and this poor guy and how he died and what a terrible tragedy that is and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, he had a really cool liver. It was a cool day, you know? So it's a very different mindset, and it's not for everybody, but for the people who are a part of it, you know, my coworkers are awesome. I would trust them with, if anything happened to me, I would trust them to do what was right by me, because they're good people and they want to do something that's good. And, you know, the criminal justice system in our country isn't always, you know, 100%, but it's nice to be part of it and know that, at least for me and for the people around me, we're trying to do our best to do the right thing and to get justice for families and for victims, and be part of something important. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, you know, I will give my email address and everything if you have more questions later, but I find
And yeah, I pretty much agree. Just seek out those internships. I don't know if the Kentucky State Police Lab in Frankfort offers internships at this point or not. I know they did back when I was at Center, but like I said, that was back in 2001. Also too, there are required hours if you want to be a DNA analyst as well as a DNA technical manager. So you might want to utilize the site aafs.org, which is the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. You can go on there and they'll list graduate school programs as well as undergraduate programs that will have the curriculum that you can graduate from that program, and you're, pretty much you're assured that you can at least apply for a job and have all that requirements. Because I know the DNA technical leader requirements for the master's degree, instead of like 9 credit hours, you need 12 credit hours of cumulative science background. And I know that when I was in undergraduate, I wasn't aware of these qualifications. I was kind of blind, and I kind of lucked into at least having everything that I needed once I graduated. Just so you're aware of that. If you want to start moving in that direction, you kind of have to start preparing in undergrad with the classes that you're taking. Also too, I mean, you're more than welcome to email us with any questions as well. But yeah, no, I love my job, and I agree with what Jasmine says, that it's a community in and of its own. I remember going to some parties with some of my friends when we were at the FBI, and our conversations were completely different than other people. And I remember taking an intern out to lunch, and we had an FBI honors intern, and we were just talking about the sexual assault or whatever. She's like, I can't handle this. I don't want to talk about that. This is very disturbing. It's like, yeah, but you're in an internship here. Is this what you want to do? So the mentality, you definitely have to be able to disconnect, I think, sometimes from what you're doing in order to be a good employee. But I love my job. I love it. I wouldn't do anything else.
Very good. Thank you both very much for joining.